Toastmaster of the evening, fellow Toastmasters and lovers of good whisky in Scotland, Ireland, and all over the world. Let me start by declaring an interest, even a conflict of interest. I work as a tour guide for Auchentoshan Distillery, Scotland's only triple distilled single malt. And because triple distillation is still the norm in Ireland, Auchentoshan, by all accounts, is the Scotch, favoured by the Irish. Well, thank you, but believe me, Scotland has been more than generous to Ireland. Barely a mile from Auchentoshan Distillery is the village of Old Kilpatrick, so named because it is in fact the birthplace of St. Patrick. Ireland's patron saint is Scottish. And not far from here in central Scotland is the town of Alloa, birthplace of one John Jameson, who migrated to Dublin with his wife, Margaret Haig, daughter of one of Scotland's most famous distilling families, and together they became the mother and father of Irish whisky. You would think with all that benevolence, particularly in regard to our national drink, our Irish friends and cousins would at least spell the word correctly. But no, they've added an E. I would have thought we could all agree that the only thing we should add to whisky is more whisky. But not all is lost. Last week I was watching that fabulous film, The Banshees of Inisherin. And in one scene, when they are in the small pub on Achill Island, and I appreciate this is quite niche, there's an advert for an Irish whisky spelt with no E. And it's not a mistake. Apparently, a distillery in Galway run by E.H. Pearce marketed their whisky correctly spelt, in my view. But I have to declare a second conflict. As you'll have noticed from my attire and my accent, I am Scottish. But the fact is, I'm half Scottish and half Irish. Genetically speaking, I'm told that means I like drinking, I just don't like paying for it. From my point of view, it also means that any competition between Scotland and Ireland is that of friends and siblings, although that can be vicious, rather than true rivals. And for that reason, I'm not going to dwell on the Irish variety, but I'll concentrate on what I know, which is single malt Scotch whisky in general and Auchentoshan in particular. The rules governing Scotch whisky are quite simple, and 3 is the magic number. Scotch whisky can only contain 3 ingredients: cereals, water, and yeast. It has to be matured for 3 years in oak casks, maximum 700 litres in capacity, and it has to be distilled, matured and bottled in Scotland at not less than 40% alcohol by volume. For single malt, additionally, all of the whisky has to be produced in a single distillery, and as the name implies, only malted barley can be used. Auchentoshan has a long history. In fact, it probably goes back to the 13th century, where we know it was the site of a monastery, and the monks used to brew beer, make mead, and also produced a distilled product, which wasn't whisky, but gave us the word whisky, Uisge Beatha, the water of life. So I like to think of whisky as water, but on a good day. But our official date of establishment is 1823, which is also the year of a very powerful Excise Act in the UK. So every distillery had to be licensed. So some of my colleagues refer to our establishment in 1823. Others say 1823 was the year we were caught. But in the 200 years, even since then and probably before, the methods of distillation have not changed all that much. And it's not all that complicated. We extract the sugars and starches from the malt by using hot water and literally mashing the malt to help extract that water. Yeast is then added to that water, or wort as we call it, and the fermentation process takes a number of hours. In fact, although we talk about 3 ingredients, there is a 4th one, time. The fermentation process takes about 65 to 70 hours. And then we embark, with our base of 8% alcohol, we embark on our triple distillation, which takes a further 20 hours. At the end of that distillation period, we have the highest alcohol percentage of any Scotch whisky, 81%. But it's not the number that's important. It's the purity of that alcohol, because the contact with the copper, and that triple distillation gives more copper contact. So at 81%, the spirit is actually quite light and very fresh. And at that point, science gives way to alchemy. And that spirit which we use for all our expressions is converted over many years into various whiskies, which are of course available to buy at Auchentoshan Distillery and elsewhere. So let me finish by issuing an invitation to all of you to look at that process in more detail as we tour the distillery together. And afterwards, perhaps, we can go for a drink. Just remember, you're paying.